My name is Ray Collins. I'm 71 years old. I live in a small house outside Nashville, Tennessee. There are people you meet once and forget by the next day, and there are people you meet again and again, year after year, at the same gas station, at the same hour of the night, and one day you realize you know that person better than half your own family, even though you don't even know their last name. This is a story about a woman I knew for 3 years. I probably saw her 100 times, talked with her for hours total, broken up into 15, 20 minutes at a time, like pieces of a puzzle you never quite finish putting together. I don't even know if she's still alive, but I think about her more often than I think about a lot of people I actually know. 1989. I'm 34 years old. I'd been on the road 4 years by then, experienced, but not yet the driver I'd become 20 years later. I mostly hauled freight south, from Tennessee down to Louisiana, sometimes further into Texas. The route repeated regularly. Once, sometimes twice a month, I'd pass through a small town in central Louisiana, and I always stopped at the same gas station on the edge of town. The station was called Pell's, after the owner's last name. A small convenience store, a few pumps, some tables under an awning where you could grab a coffee and rest a minute. A standard stop for truckers on that route. Nothing special if you looked at it from outside. Just one more stop among hundreds just like it on that road. And working in that little store every single time was her. I don't remember the first time we talked. It wasn't some defining moment. I just walked in for coffee, she poured it, I said thanks, and that's how something started that lasted 3 years. Her name was Janice. At least that's what was written on the little name tag pinned to her uniform shirt. She was maybe 30, maybe a little older. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Thin, tired eyes that still always lit up when she talked about something she loved. And what she loved was books. I don't know exactly why this stuck with me, but one time, maybe my second or third visit, I noticed a book lying on the counter next to the cash register. Worn with dog-eared pages, clearly read more than once. I asked her what she was reading, and her face, which up until then had just been pleasant the way any clerk's face is pleasant, suddenly came alive. She named some novel, I honestly don't remember which one now, and started telling me about it with so much enthusiasm you'd think she was relaying the most important news of her life. I listened. I didn't read much myself back then. Work, the road, exhaustion. But listening to her talk about books turned out to be more interesting than I expected, especially when the person talking really loves what she's talking about. That's how it started. Every visit after that, and they kept repeating since my route never changed, we'd talk a little. At first, briefly. I'd grab a coffee, we'd trade a few words about the weather or the road, and I'd drive off. But gradually the conversations got longer. I started picking up details. Janice told me she'd worked at that station for 5 years, that she had a daughter around 10 years old who lived with Janice's mother in a neighboring state. She never explained the details of how that came to be, and I never pushed. Some doors are better left closed if the person doesn't open them herself. She probably read about a book a week. The library in that little town was small, so she often reread the same books or borrowed them from people passing through. Sometimes, and this touched me deeply, she'd ask truckers who regularly drove that route to bring her books from bigger cities. I did that myself a few times. I'd stop in Memphis or Baton Rouge, walk into a bookstore, buy something that looked interesting, and bring it to her next time. She always thanked me like I'd given her something priceless. Maybe to her it was priceless. One time I brought her a book I'd read about in a newspaper, something about travel, about faraway countries. She held it in her hands for a long time, flipping through the pages, looking at the cover. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, "I've never been further than 3 states from here." I asked if she'd want to see more. She looked at me and said, "I do, someday, when my daughter's older." I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded. One detail I remember best, and the one that eventually gave this story its name, was how she ordered her coffee. Every trucker at that station took their coffee with sugar, with creamer, with something to mask the bitterness of standard road coffee. Janice? No. Always black, no sugar, nothing added. I once asked her why. She said, "If you're going to drink coffee, drink it real. Why lie to yourself with sugar?" That seemed like a small throwaway line at the time. Now, 30 years later, I think there was more about who she really was in that one sentence than in any other conversation we ever had. She lived that way, I think, without decoration, without self-deception. She looked straight at things as they were, even when it was bitter. Months passed. I'd come in, we'd talk, I'd drive off. Sometimes the conversations were about books, sometimes about something heavier. I remember one conversation that happened in winter, maybe a year and a half after we'd met. I came in late at night, the station nearly empty, just her and one other driver quietly drinking coffee in the corner. Janice looked especially worn down that night. I asked if she was all right. She said it had just been a hard week. Bills, a car that kept breaking down. Her daughter had been sick and she couldn't go see her because she couldn't afford to miss her shifts at work. I asked if it was hard, the distance, her daughter so far away and her here. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I do what I have to do. Sometimes love isn't about being there every day. Sometimes it's about keeping a roof over the head of someone you love, even if the price for that is being far away." I thought then, and I still think now, that it was one of the wisest things I ever heard on the road in 32 years. One time, maybe a year after we'd first met, I came in late, around 2 in the morning. The station was empty, just her behind the counter, clearly exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. I asked if everything was okay. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said the man she'd once left, her daughter's father, had come back to town, that he was looking for her, that she was scared. I didn't know what to say. I'm just a truck driver, not a cop, not a lawyer. But I asked if she needed help, to call someone, to walk her home, anything. She shook her head, said she'd manage on her own, said she always had. I didn't push. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is just be there, without trying to fix a problem you can't fix. I stayed an extra hour that night, longer than usual. We talked about something completely different, about a book she was reading, about small things. I think she just needed someone there, not asking any more questions. A few months later, she told me the man had disappeared, moved on somewhere, never showed up again. She let out a breath of relief I could see physically in how her posture changed, in her face. "Maybe now things will finally be quiet," she said. I said I hope so. Years passed. 1989 rolled into 90, then 91. I kept driving that route, kept stopping at that same station, kept seeing Janice. Our conversations became a kind of constant thread in my life on the road, a point of stability among thousands of miles of different highways, different people, different stories. I knew that when I pulled into that station, she'd be there, with some new book, some new thought she wanted to share. She asked about me, too, about my wife, about my work, about what I'd seen on the road. Sometimes I'd tell her about certain things, without names, of course, without details that could identify anyone, and she'd listen as intently as if I were a character out of one of her favorite novels. One time she told me, "You know, Ray, you're actually like a character in a novel. A man who sees more than other people, simply because nobody notices him." I laughed and said I was just a truck driver. She shook her head. "You're the best listener I know. That's a rare quality." We weren't close friends in the usual sense. We never saw each other outside that gas station, never called each other. I didn't even know where exactly she lived. But there was something honest and simple in those short conversations every few weeks. A kind of trust that built up slowly, layer by layer, like rings on a tree. I remember one more moment in the summer of 91. I'd brought her a book, something about a woman traveling the country alone, looking for herself. Janice read it in a week, and when I came back, she was visibly moved. "This book," she said, "feels like it was written about me. Except I haven't gotten to the part yet where the heroine finally leaves." I asked if she ever would. She looked out at the road past the station window, at the headlights of trucks passing by, and said, "Someday, when the right time comes." I didn't know then that the right time would never come for her. At least, I never found out if it did. And then, one day, I came in, and she wasn't there. Standing behind the counter was another woman, younger, a stranger. I asked where Janice was. The girl shrugged, said she'd only been working there a week, that Janice had left the job. She didn't really know why. I figured maybe she'd just switched shifts. I came back 2 weeks later, same girl again. I asked again, more insistently. She said that, as far as she knew, Janice had just stopped showing up to work one day. The owner waited a few days, then hired someone else. Just gone. I didn't know what to think. Maybe she'd moved closer to her daughter. Maybe she'd found another job somewhere else. Maybe that man had come back, and that was the worst thought of all. The one I tried to push away, but it kept returning again and again as I drove that road over the following months. I asked the station's owner, an old man named Pell, the one the place was named after. He told me the same thing the girl had. Janice had simply stopped showing up one day. He'd tried calling the number he had on file for her. It didn't work anymore. He said that, unfortunately, this was a typical story for places like this. People come, people go, sometimes without any explanation at all. I asked if he knew where her mother lived, the one raising Janice's daughter. He didn't know. I'd reached the end of what I could do. I was just a truck driver who stopped at that gas station every few weeks. I had no way to actually search for someone, no private investigator, no time, not even enough information to start with. I asked around a little more in that town, the cashier at the store across the street, a man at the service station nearby. Nobody knew anything. Or maybe they did and just didn't see any reason to tell a stranger passing through. I kept driving that route for years after that. The gas station stayed, clerks changed, the equipment changed, eventually even the name changed. But every time I stopped there, and I did stop, even when there was no reason left except habit, I thought about her, about black coffee, no sugar, about the books she lent and returned with the kind of care you'd give to something alive, about that night she was scared and I didn't know how to help, about the daughter she was raising from a distance, probably seeing only rarely, about the dream of traveling that she always put off for the right time. I never found out what happened to her. Maybe she found a better life somewhere else. Maybe she finally managed to get closer to her daughter. Maybe she even made it past those 3 states she'd known her whole life. Or maybe, and this is the worst possibility, the one I try not to think about, something bad happened and no one will ever know the truth. Many years later, after I'd retired, I sometimes think about the people I knew on the road. Not friends, not family, just people I crossed paths with regularly for some stretch of my life, who then disappeared, the way that gas station disappeared in my rear-view mirror. Janice was one of the most important of those people. I think about her because she taught me something important about loneliness on the road. That even the briefest, most accidental encounters can have depth if you let them have it. That a person who pours your coffee every day can know more about your life than people you see every week back home, simply because in those brief moments there are no masks, no expectations, nothing except the honesty of 2 strangers who decided once to talk a little longer than usual. I think about her because she reminded me that books aren't just entertainment. For some people, they're the only way to see a world they may never see with their own eyes. That a dream of travel you keep postponing for the right time is still a kind of hope, even if that time never comes. And I think about her because sometimes life doesn't give you an ending. Not every story closes with an explanation. Not every person you meet on your way gets a final chapter you get to read. Some stories just stop, unfinished, like a book someone started reading, then set down on a table and walked away from, and no one ever finds out whether they came back to finish it. I hope Janice found her happiness wherever she is now. I hope she's still reading. I hope she finally saw more than 3 states. I hope her coffee is still black, no sugar, no lying to herself. And if, by some miracle, she ever sees this video, let her know that one truck driver, who she may not even remember, still thinks about her and about those conversations about books in the smell of gasoline and road coffee. Some people leave a mark on your life not because they were in it for long, but because they were honest while they were there. The road gave me a lot of stories over 32 years. Not all of them have an ending. Not all of them have a moral. Some of them just stay with you, like a question you'll never get an answer to, but one that makes you a little wiser simply because you keep thinking about it. Ray Collins, Nashville, Tennessee. See you next time.